Hello, guys. A little delay. There's a section there where you can go click ask, where you can ask me a question. You put your question in there. It goes to my email, and I'll respond via this format. Unless it's something that requires some documents or feedback, where I would just email you back directly. So, anyways, so let me get to your questions. Okay, so I've been getting some questions. The new feature on the site seems to be working well. So here you go. Question number one. This is from Jonathan in Great Falls. Why do restaurants fail? Well, that's a good question. Restaurants are known for not having a high success rate, but after having spent 32 years in the food and beverage / hotel or restaurant or resort business, I find that a large percentage of the time, restaurants, or any business for that matter, but in this case restaurants, why they fail is typically because it's just laziness or stupidity, or just not putting the work in. For example, when I was a chef and I would go from place to place, I would go work at a new place, and then I would, a few years later go work at another place or whatever. I always would observe for the first 2 weeks, and a lot of the issues were because of people just not doing the work. It's that simple. For example, doing food cost. Okay, food cost is where you determine how much it costs you to put something on a plate. Generally speaking, in a nutshell, this is not exact, but in a nutshell, if something costs me $1, I need to charge you $3 to be profitable. That's food cost in a nutshell. There's more to it than that, but that's just a very, very, very basic way to put it. So, one thing that restaurants, managers or owners will do is they won't do the work and cost out the food. They may look at the competing restaurants in the area and look at what they're charging. And they'll say, oh, okay, well, he's charging $6 for buffalo wings. Well, I'll charge the same. Now, obviously, you can't be too overpriced or what have you, because, people won't go to your restaurant unless you're offering something the other competition isn't. But they don't take the time to actually cost out the recipe. And it's just a lot of work, but it's not rocket science. So a lot of restaurants fail for just basic things like that. And then managing. It's a lot easier for a manager to look the other way than really address every issue, because you are essentially babysitting. I'm not suggesting that everybody is a baby. I'm suggesting in the sense that it's like babysitting in that you have to be involved in everything. You have to watch everything and correct any mistakes. But, it's a lot of follow-up. I mean, you have to follow up incessantly. And a lot of places just don't do that. They don't put the effort. And that's what it really comes down to. They're just not putting the effort. And it's sad because, it's not rocket science. But, you just got to put the effort, So, where was I? So that's really what it comes down to. A lot, and of course there are other factors. I mean, that's just an example. I mean, maybe the location's poor, maybe the menu's not smart. I mean, there's a big one I see a lot of times. Menus that are just not smart. I worked at a place part-time years ago. They had a small menu. They had like 6 appetizers. 3 of the appetizers were salads. If you have a small menu, you better make sure your menu's diverse. And I would see many things repeated on the menu. Consistency is another big one. Consistency that's why in the 50s, when these fast food restaurants started, were being created and catching on, McDonald's outperformed the other ones, because if you had a burger in Washington, it tasted the same as a burger in Texas. Okay? Because McDonald's knew right away about consistency. And the other places didn't quite get it at first. I mean, obviously they got it now. Or at least that's the story I was told. But consistency is key. There's a barbecue restaurant here in Texas called Rudy's, and it's all over Texas. And they are really damn consistent. And I have to, even though that's not 5-star or fine dining or whatever, who cares? They're setting a very good example for how a restaurant should be run in terms of consistency. So that's consistency, laziness. Here's another one. I worked in a restaurant where the manager of the restaurant, his childhood friend used to supervise the dining room, and we had issues going on. But the manager wouldn't reprimand the dining room manager because they were childhood friends. So these mistakes would go on and on because they put their friendship in front of the business. Um, but I think, in generally speaking, your average manager doesn't really know how to hold people accountable for the most part, or even manage that well. I mean, like when you train somebody, most people, because I remember when I was trained, somebody would show me something, then that was it. When I train somebody, I show them, and during it, I ask questions, I get them involved, and then I also follow up. You got to make sure that, and you got to go and check after, maybe a week or 2 weeks later, and do random spot checks, because I don't know what it is about human nature and wanting to change, but if the recipe calls for a teaspoon of salt, it may be like that. It may be accurate for a while, but I guarantee you, at some point down the road, that teaspoon of salt is going to change for whatever reason. It just seems to be human nature to change. So those are just some reasons restaurants fail. And next question from Julia in Washington, D.C. Ordering wine in a restaurant is intimidating. Wine can be intimidating to people, but I tell people there's no reason to be, okay? Use the people in the restaurant to help you. That's what they're there for. And if they're going to make you feel bad for not knowing or for being ignorant or whatever, then they don't deserve your business, okay? They're there to help you, okay? Ask questions. This is how you learn. Ask questions. A lot of people think, too, that the more expensive the wine, the better. That's completely untrue. I think I used to drink tequila. I don't drink liquor, and I just can't handle it anymore. But 20 years ago when I was drinking it, at the time, as I recall, the more expensive, the better for tequila. But with wine, that's not the case. I mean, you can spend $10 and get a good bottle of wine. Okay, will it be the quality of a $30 bottle? No. But a lot of people associate price with quality. That's a big mistake. You want to get what's going to work best for the meal. All right. Now, if you're trying to impress somebody, that happens a lot. I see that. The best thing to do is when you go to a restaurant, ask them. Say, hey, I'm having the steak or I'm having the fish or whatever. What wine do you suggest? And I'm trying to learn here. Please explain why. Because, think about it. When you ask somebody to express their knowledge, who doesn't like that? Who doesn't like a chance to show their knowledge? Because they're making themselves look good by showing their knowledge. So that's what I tell people. Ask. So, and then I have here. This is from Mahinder in Bombay. What is the best way to marinate meat to get it tender? Okay, this is a misconception about marinating and getting meat tender. It can help, but the single best way to get meat tender is by long, slow cooking, okay? I generally view marinating as a means for adding flavor more than anything else. Okay, I did a class on marinades years ago. It was about 12 years ago, and we did all kinds of different marinades. We did vinegar, we did wine, we did yogurt, we did all kinds of other things. And you also have to be careful when you're dealing with acidity. It can make the protein, it can make it tough because acidity can technically kind of cook it. Think of it this way. If you've ever had ceviche, which is where you slice fish, raw fish, very thin, and then you would lay it out on a flat surface, and then you would squeeze fresh lime or lemon juice or some kind of citrus on it. Then you'd put some seasoning and maybe a little olive oil. That fish is not cooked in the sense of like when you put a piece of meat on the stove, but it's cooked in the sense that the proteins are coagulated by the acidity in that fruit or whatever it is you're using, vinegar, whatever. So, whenever you're dealing with acid, you got to be careful. For me, I find The only time I usually like to marinate, for the most part, is if I'm doing like a beef bourguignon or coq au vin, and you put the chicken for coq au vin or the beef for beef bourguignon. Bourguignon refers to Burgundy, so you're going to use a red Burgundy wine, which is Pinot Noir. But marinades for me, I use for flavor. Okay, and when I say long, slow cooking, let's say you have a top round or something, or let's say you're doing beef stew. Okay, and you have your pieces of meat cut up. Naturally, you're going to sear them over very high heat first, but when I say long, slow cooking, I mean lower heat and for a longer amount of time. Okay, this is one thing you can't rush. Okay, because the meat will be tough. Okay, so if you're ever taking a less tender cut of meat, and generally a less tender cut is something from the leg or the shoulders or the arm. Well, I don't think they call them arms. So you need long, slow cooking. Okay, so again, low heat for a longer time. And if you're ever not sure what low heat is, well, let's say you're making beef stew and they tell you to put the oven at 250 for 3 hours. Well, if you drop the oven to 225 and cook it for 4 hours, you're probably not going to hurt it. I mean, obviously keep an eye on it because you don't want to overcook it to the point to where it starts falling apart. But provided you don't get to the point to where you overcook it, you're not hurting the product by cooking it longer at a lower heat. Where you do hurt it is if you try to rush it, so don't do that. Now, I remember when I lived in India, there was, they use tandoors, and tandoors really give a nice flavor. I'd love to have a tandoor in my house, in my backyard. They in India, they use this stuff, if I remember the name, it's called amchur. I think I'm getting that right. And it's like ground raw papaya, if I recall. And they would put that on some of their meats or prawns or whatever. So I remember it was my first night in India. My boss took me out. I had just flown, the day before, I had just flown from New York City. And, we got a bunch of kebabs. And we had lamb, we had chicken, which was called murga malai tikka. And then we had naan bread, which is phenomenal, and dal, which is like lentils. There's different types of dal. The prawns were really tender. And I remember asking them, I said, how are they getting the prawns so tender? Because in the West, we would just, maybe put some seasoning or whatever and then grill them. Well, they put this amchur. But the thing is we did a test. If you leave the amchur too long, it makes the protein kind of broken down, like kind of mushy. It's a really nasty flavor or texture. So you got to be careful, okay? So that's marinade. So again, long, slow cooking is the best thing to do. And then again, I use marinades more for flavor, okay? Now, one word on marinades. If you ever do a marinade that has some sugar in it, whether it be honey, sugar, could even be some kind of fruit, remember that will make it caramelize, okay, faster, all right? To help you, when you think of caramelizing, what does the top of a creme brulee look like? Where they put the sugar and they burn it. That's caramelized. Caramelizing doesn't only apply to sugar. Like if you put a piece of meat in the pan, you would say caramelize it, get a nice color. But anyways, so yeah, be mindful of anything you marinate that has anything sweet, sugar, honey, or something like that. Okay, well here's a random one. Do I have a favorite restaurant? This is from Michelle in Houston. Do I have a favorite restaurant? I've had several great meals. One of my favorite restaurants is in Washington, D.C. It's called Haleo. The chef Jose Andres, he opened it around in 1993. I remember I went there when it first, shortly after it first opened. I just started taking wine classes, and it's a tapas restaurant. And for those of you guys who don't know tapas is it's Spanish, and the term tapa just means top. Now, when you go to a bar in Spain, they'll have their bar there, but it's not like a typical bar like what we have in America. I mean, they have bars like that, but when you go to a tapas bar, they'll have like the bar where you can set your drink, and then they'll have like a case right there, and they'll have the tapas already made. And you say what you want, and they'll put it on a plate. And a lot of people for happy hour after work, they'll go and that's what they'll do for happy hour. They'll go get a glass of wine and get some tapas, and they'll go from place to place because they're very small portions. So, like in Haleo, when you eat tapas style, 2 people could feasibly eat like 10 or 12 things, depending how hungry you are. Because again, each plate is smaller than a typical appetizer. Okay, and it's a fun way to eat. And then I've had other great experiences. I've been to Charlie Trouter's in Chicago. He passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago. 2 years ago, I think. Where was I? But you know, the problem with 5-star dining is sometimes it can be stuffy. Yeah, but in New York, I've had great meals. Danny Meyer in New York City does a fantastic job. So, but anyways, but my favorite restaurant, typically I don't want to feel stuffy. That's one of my criteria. The food has to be great, of course, but it doesn't have to be fancy. And really the friendly service. But I also find sometimes it depends on the context. So, but anyways, guys, thank you for your questions. I appreciate it. Again, you can send me a message. Go to my website, chefcurtsassak.com. It's all one word. So you have the word chef and then CurtSassak.com. And you'll see there's a section, Ask Curt a Question, or Ask the Chef a Question. I forget what it says. I forget my own site. And then I'll be happy to answer it. And I'll do it in this way so that everybody can hear the answers to other things. And so, again, thank you. I hope to see you guys again. Hope to see your questions. And you have a wonderful day.